That's a lot of responsibility. If you mess this up, the boss is out of a job. Do your best, Mr. Driver. I used to be homeless, but now I work as the CEO as driver. One day, the CEO and the little VP were set to have a crucial negotiation with an overseas company. I drove the two of them to the meeting, but as the clock ticked closer, the interpreter still hadn't shown up, putting the deal at risk of cancellation. Seeing the CEO in distress, I volunteered to step in as an interpreter at the last minutes. The little VP, unaware of my background, mocked me, but the CEO trusted me and gave me the opportunity. When I stepped into the negotiation room as the interpreter, I came face to face with someone unexpected. From that moment, the negotiations took a surprising turn that no one saw coming. My name is Tom Wilson. I'm 29 years old and currently working as a driver for a major corporation. My job is to drive the company executives to and from their destinations every day. I grew up in a fairly wealthy family, raised lovingly by my parents. My father, in his younger days, started a business offering online services, which turned out to be a success. Thanks to the flexibility of online services, he and my mother managed the business without hiring employees, enjoying a comfortable lifestyle far beyond the average salaried worker. Because of this, I had a privileged childhood, never wanting for anything. My parents, being self-employed, had a lot of free time, so I was often taken on trips and lived a childhood much more fortunate than most other kids. My parents were deeply committed to my education, having experienced the advantages of entrepreneurship over working at typical office jobs. They often said, "Tom, make sure you develop the skills to succeed on your own." Thanks to their financial stability, I had access to advanced educational opportunities. And perhaps due to inheriting my father's sharp mind, I achieved top grades without much difficulty. From a young age, I was exposed to international perspectives to avoid being confined to English norms. I was also frequently taken on long overseas trips during school breaks, which naturally made me gravitate toward attending college abroad. In the end, I enrolled at Harvard Business School in Boston and graduated with strong academic performance. It's not an exaggeration to say I followed the classic elite path. While I was interested in literature, natural sciences, and social sciences, I chose business school on my father's recommendation, where I studied cutting-edge management techniques. My thesis was so well received that even my advisor gave it high praise, and I received numerous offers from prominent American companies. However, I politely declined all these offers and chose to return to US. This was a decision I had made before even coming to the US. A life competing with the world's best minds on the front lines of American business would have been thrilling. But the relentless grind and extreme stress of that lifestyle didn't appeal to me. Maybe I could have lasted a year or so, but I wasn't confident I could sustain myself in such an environment long term. Instead, I wanted to return to US, where I felt more at home. Even if it wasn't as exciting as America, I wanted to help my parents, who had given me the chance to learn so much. The advanced management techniques I had acquired would surely help elevate my father's online business to the next level. To strengthen the foundation my father had built, I returned home equipped with the latest tools to make it even more solid. That was the future my parents and I had envisioned before I left for the US. After graduating, I gave up everything in my American life and headed back to US to make that dream a reality. But from there, my life took a sharp downward spiral, plunging to the lowest of lows. When I returned home, everything had changed. The house, twice the size of a typical suburban home, felt strangely quiet and eerily dark. Adding to my unease, I hadn't been able to reach my parents for a few days leading up to my return. With a growing sense of dread, I tried opening the door, but it wouldn't budge. The state-of-the-art fingerprint and vein recognition lock, which I had registered last year during a visit, didn't respond. I called both my parents, but their phones went straight to voicemail. The silence raised my suspicions, and that's when a black car pulled into the driveway. Three men with intimidating looks stepped out and surrounded me. "Hey, you connected to this place?" One of the men glanced at the suitcase I was holding and muttered, "This has gotta be the old man's son, right?" Before I could respond, they grabbed me roughly and shoved me into the car. Thinking they were robbers, I struggled desperately to resist, but with three of them overpowering me, I stood no chance. They demanded I open my suitcase, threatening me as they held me down. Having no experience with anything rough, I trembled and obediently opened the suitcase as they demanded. I also unlocked my phone and handed it over as instructed. "Can you contact your parents?" When I shook my head, one of the men started combing through my call logs and messaging app history without hesitation. Anything. Looks like he's not lying. No response to his calls for the past 3 days. Another man, who had been roughly rummaging through my suitcase in silence, finally spoke up. "Same here. Not a single note or message left behind." I was shaking uncontrollably, terrified of what might happen to me. But then the men suddenly softened their attitude, releasing me and letting me out of the car. "Sorry for the rough treatment, kid. We're all just on edge about a big payday slipping through our fingers." "I see. But who exactly are you? And where are my parents?" The three men exchanged glances before one of them answered. "Unbelievable scoundrels, your folks, skipping town and even leaving their only son behind. Gutsy, I'll give them that. Look, kid, we're busy, so here's the short version. Your dad's company went under 2 weeks ago, buried in massive debt. They even borrowed from high-interest lenders like us. Then both of them disappeared without a trace. The company went bankrupt. That can't be true. They really didn't tell you anything, taking out extra loans and vanishing without telling their son. They must have planned this thoroughly. Smart couple like that probably didn't leave any traces, but we've still got to look." With that, the three men got back in their car and drove off. As they left, the driver said, "If you think of anything about their whereabouts, let us know. We won't treat you badly," and handed me a bent business card. The card had an obviously fake name, Joseph Miller. Along with a contact number, it also listed a title, Business Consultant, which seemed equally made up. I stood there holding the card, watching their car disappear down the road, frozen in place for a long time afterward. There isn't much detail to share about what happened immediately after that. My father and mother had suffered losses from risky investments. To recover, they mortgaged both the business and the houses. They then ventured into even riskier investments, which only deepened their losses. Finally, before the company's credit completely collapsed, they took out additional loans and fled with the money. The parents I knew would never have gotten involved in unstable investments. At least, that's what I had always believed. While I was in the US, something must have changed their once prudent outlook on life. Whatever it was, They chose to dive into dangerous investments. When they realized they had lost everything, they gathered all the money they could and vanished into the night. Taking me with them or even leaving a note apparently wasn't part of their plan. Perhaps they thought that if they left me a note, I might lead people like the debt collectors I encountered right to them. Knowing how clever my parents were, they must have been extremely thorough in erasing all traces before disappearing. The next day, when I mechanically dialed their phone numbers, all I heard was a message saying, "This number is no longer in service." Since then, I haven't even tried to look for my parents. I've accepted that I'll probably never see them again. I had some money on hand, but staying in hotels for several days quickly drained it. Maybe I should have turned to public services for help, but what would I even say? "Excuse me, my parents skipped town after defaulting on their loans. Can you help me?" Would anyone actually assist me in such a situation? Given how things stood, it wouldn't have been surprising if my parents were charged with fraud depending on the creditor's actions. I felt like I had suddenly been cut off from everything in the world, adrift like a helpless leaf in a current, completely alone. The company I had planned to build my future on was gone, and the parents I thought I'd spend my life with had abandoned me without hesitation. I was devastated, unable to muster the will to do anything. Even though I tried to stay at the cheapest hotels, my funds dwindled rapidly. I realized I needed to work, no matter what kind of jobs it was. That's when it hit me. I didn't even have an address. Imagine the irony. A Harvard Business School graduate unable to apply for a temp job at an employment agency. At that point, I thought I'd have to consult a nonprofit that helps people in distress, if not outright apply for government assistance. But for some reason, I couldn't bring myself to go to such a place. As a young man, it felt wrong to ask for help, saying, "My parents committed a shameful act and ran away. Please help me." More importantly, as the son of parents who had caused harm to society, I felt I had no right to use the precious resources of those relief organizations. I started feeling an overwhelming sense of self-loathing, thinking it might be better for me to just disappear altogether. Eventually, I wandered into a neighborhood populated by undocumented foreign workers. I had read online that you could get work there without anyone asking questions, so I approached the area clinging to that hope. However, I hadn't gone far before I saw people yelling loudly in the streets, groups of half-dressed men sleeping openly on the sidewalks. The sight made me freeze, unable to move forward. I thought someone like me, timid and uncertain, would only invite trouble if I entered further, so I turned back. Feeling completely lost, I cradled my head in my hands. That's when I remembered the business card given to me by the creditor I had met in front of my parents' houses. On a whim, I called the number and explained, "I don't have any information on my parents. I have nowhere to go and no money. Is there any work you can give me?" I was sure I'd be dismissed, but to my surprise, the man on the other end asked, "Where are you?" About 30 minutes later, he drove to the location I had told him. My first impression of him had been terrible, but this creditor sympathized with my situation. He even took me to a nearby diner and bought me a meal. Having not eaten properly for days, the food tasted so good that I couldn't stop myself from tearing up. Seeing me like that, the creditor said, "You're an honest guy, not cut out for the kind of work I do." Afterward, he put me in his car and drove me to a spot under a railway bridge by the riverbank. Under the bridge, there were a few makeshift huts built from scraps where a group of about a dozen homeless people live together. I can't get you a job, kid, but at least you won't die today or tomorrow. Stay here, leave, do whatever you want. He introduced me to an older man, seemingly the leader of the group, and said, "Keep an eye on this guy for a while, will you?" The old man and the creditor seemed to know each other well and chatted for a while. Eventually, the creditor handed the old man a carton of cigarettes, perhaps as a sort of payment. "Well, this is it for me. I helped you out more than I usually would, but our connection ends here. From now on, you'll have to figure things out yourself." With those words, he patted my shoulder and left. I never understood why he had been so kind to me, but I kept showing my appreciation until he was out of sight. After that, I began living as part of the homeless community under the river bridge. When I used to think of homeless people, I pictured them sleeping in cardboard shelters, something I had often seen near train stations or under overpasses. But the residents here each had their own small hut where they lived. Some members had worked for years in construction until injuries left them unable to continue. These people cleverly pieced together scrap materials they collected from various places to build the huts. While the huts were very flimsy and looked like they wouldn't withstand a storm, having a space shielded from the outside world made an enormous difference. At first, I stayed in the hut of the old man who had been introduced to me. His hut had a small space, just under the size of a 6 by 8 foot room, but there was enough room for me to sleep. The old man introduced himself as principal. In this community, everyone had a nickname that they used to refer to each other. The old man had never actually been a school principal, but because he took on a leadership role here, someone had jokingly called him that, and it eventually stuck. You can stay here for a few days, but if you decide to stay longer, you'll need to work with the others and take on your own role. Everyone contributes something they can offer to the group. A role of my own. Well, for now, it's fine. Just start by helping out the others around here and slowly get used to the place. But if you need cash, you'll have to earn it on your own. One strict rule: never take over work that others here are already doing. With those words, the principal explained that even among the homeless, there are rules everyone must follow to coexist. Jobs like collecting cans or gathering magazines to sell for cash were already divided among the nearby homeless community. If I butted in without permission, it would cause trouble, so I had to avoid it. If I could find some way to earn cash that didn't overlap with anyone else's work, I was free to do so, but I had to ensure I didn't bother the local residents. This rule was non-negotiable. For over 3 years after that, I lived as part of the homeless community by the riverbank. I learned from a fellow resident who knew a lot about edible wild plants. I began traveling a bit farther out to collect them and sold them to local farmers to earn money. Since I was young and physically capable, I avoided trouble by working outside the local homeless territories, venturing deep into the mountains to make my income. With the small amounts of cash I earned, I paid one of the experienced builders in the community to help me construct my own small hut. Having my own space and working together with the others, my extensive knowledge naturally became known to everyone. I never flaunted my education, but I'd casually answer questions whenever they came up. Eventually, people started saying, "You sure know everything." And I earned the nickname Professor. "Hey, Professor, about this article." That's how it started. People began asking me questions about magazine articles they picked up, and I'd explain the background information as best as I could. Sometimes, They delay selling a magazine they found just to bring it back and ask me about an interesting article. When I broke down topics like politics, economics, or even American affairs, everyone listened intently and seemed impressed. I'm sure they realized I had lived overseas at some point, but no one ever asked me directly, "Did you used to live abroad?" Although they actively asked questions, no one ever brought up my past. This unspoken courtesy made me come to love this place as if it were my true home. One day, a friend brought over an article about a major meteor shower that was expected to be visible soon. Naturally, he asked me, "What makes this different from regular shooting stars? And why is everyone so excited about it?" I've always loved science, especially topics about space, and I had once considered pursuing it in college. So, I launched into an impromptu lecture about the structure of the universe, even though no one had asked for it. What started as a one-on-one conversation soon gathered an audience, and by the end, more than 10 people were sitting around me. I used stones on the ground to represent stars and galaxies, explaining their movements and what it meant to observe them from Earth. At one point, someone interrupted with, "That can't be true." And another immediately shot back, "You don't know anything, so don't talk about space," which made everyone burst into laughter. After wrapping up the unusually long lecture, the group gradually dispersed to their huts or to attend to other matters. That's when I noticed someone who wasn't from our community standing a short distance away, watching me. When our eyes met, the person slowly began walking toward me. I thought they might be a local resident, upset by the noise of our conversation, coming over to complain. I waited nervously as they approached. "Excuse me," they began. "I've been listening to your talk for a while. You have an impressive depth of knowledge." Honestly, I was very moved. Relieved it wasn't a complaint, I replied, "Oh no, it's nothing special." Assuming they were a neighbor, I focused on responding politely to avoid causing offense. But their response was unexpected. "My name is Jones. I don't live nearby, but I sometimes walk around this area and occasionally see you all here." "I see. I've seen you a few times explaining things to everyone like you did today. So this time, I decided to gather the courage to secretly listen in on what you were saying." "Is that so?" "Actually, I'm quite an astronomy enthusiast myself, and I was very interested in the meteor shower. But I must say, I was truly impressed by how you explained the structure of the universe so accurately, clearly without using any reference materials. That's why I thought I'd like to have a chat with you. If you have some time, would you mind taking a walk with me?" "A walk, you say? Well, as you can see, I'm not exactly on a schedule, so if I'll do, sure." I usually try to avoid getting too close to the general public, but since his manner was so polite, I figured it wouldn't hurt to spend a little time with him. We walked along the riverbank, talking for several minutes. Initially, we discussed astronomy, but gradually Jones began sharing the stress he was dealing with. "I don't say this to flaunt my position, but I run a company." "Oh, a company president? What brings you to a place like this, then?" "Business has had its ups and downs, but overall, it's been successful. In fact, my company has grown larger than I ever expected. By all rights, I should feel a sense of fulfillment, but recently, everything just feels empty to me, even though you've achieved success that others would envy. Precisely because of that success, many people have started flocking to me. At the same time, Some longtime colleagues have begun voicing their dissatisfaction with how I've changed and have left. I see. Those who approach me now seem enthusiastic, but most of them are motivated by the benefits they can gain from associating with me. And when the circumstances at work shift, their smiles vanish, and they can turn into adversaries without hesitation. It seemed Jones was struggling with the burdens of success. I couldn't help but think that if I had succeeded in building my father's company, I might have faced similar troubles one day. When I see you giving lectures to everyone, letting them ask questions freely, sharing opinions, and laughing together, it makes me envious. The people here only have the present moment. There's no thought of exploiting others for profit. I think that's why the atmosphere here feels so positive. I replied. Interesting. That makes sense. Jones closed his eyes for a moment, then suddenly opened them and said, This might seem abrupt, but would you consider working with me? What? It's impolite to say, but any kind of work. No, that's not the right way to put it. I can see you've studied a lot. With your foundation, you could handle any job. I want someone like you by my side. Wait, hold on. I don't understand where this is coming from. Forgive me for being so blunt, but you don't have a home or any assets, right? Yet, you live in the present with quiet determination. You have the ability to bring genuine smiles to the faces of those who listen to you. I believe you've grasped what's most important in life and held on to it. I appreciate the compliment, but I'm not anything special. I've just been running away from reality and given up on going back. That may be your self-assessment, but I've encountered many people in my life, and I'm certain that what you have is rare. I want to create an environment where I can have daily conversations with someone like you. I know it's sudden and pushy, but could you at least consider it? Though I initially declined, Jones didn't give up. Even if you ultimately refuse, I'd like you to think about it for a while. I know it's a bit shameless to say, but I'm prepared to offer you a generous compensation. Jones left, saying he would return in a week and wanted my answer by then. I went back to my hut and decided to consult the principal about it. Why didn't you just say yes right away? The principal's response was simple. You should obviously go. The news spread quickly among my friends, and everyone unanimously said, you should take the opportunity. We'll miss your lectures, honestly, but if someone's offering to take you in, you shouldn't hesitate. That's a place you usually can't go back to, even if you want to. Exactly. If you ever decide you want to come back here, you always can. But going over there, people like us can't get that kind of chance without everything being handed to us. Maybe it's just not your time to stay here yet. Go take another look at the world, and if you still want to cut ties with it, then you can make that decision later. That's what this opportunity is about. Encouraged by their words, I ultimately decided to accept Jones's offer. The riverbank community threw a small farewell party for me, sending me off with smiles and good cheer. Jones was thrilled and asked me what kind of position I'd like. Deep down, though, I had developed a fear of forming close relationships with others, stemming from the feeling of being abandoned by my parents. I wondered if there could be a job where I wouldn't have to interact deeply with people. I imagined working alone in a warehouse, moving items as instructed, away from others. But Jones offered me a position as a chauffeur for an executive, spending most of the day inside the car and simply ensuring safe transportation to destinations meant there would be minimal interpersonal stress. Nearly half of my work would likely involve driving Jones. so his original hope of having meaningful conversations with me would also be fulfilled, given that I had been homeless for over 3 years without making any effort. I felt it would be unreasonable to expect anything better, so I accepted the offer. It has now been 3 years since I started working as Jones's chauffeur. During our drives, I often engaged in conversations with Jones as he requested. After 3 years, I had come to understand his character quite well. From my perspective, Jones was a sincere and kind person. However, his kindness made him struggle as he repeatedly made tough decisions to succeed in the harsh business world. But since he began talking with me, it seemed that his burden had eased significantly, and he often expressed deep gratitude to me. "I'm so glad I was able to recruit you. If not, I might have become emotionally numb by now, treating people like objects. If your work ever gets too overwhelming and you feel like running away, I'll teach you how to drop out." I replied with a grin. Jones laughed heartily. We had grown close enough to share such light-hearted jokes with each other. I genuinely enjoyed my conversations with Jones, and driving him had become a simple pleasure for me. However, as my job was officially that of an executive chauffeur, about half of my duties involved driving other people besides Jones. During those times, unless I was directly asked something, I made it a point not to initiate conversation. Most of the other executives would spend their travel time reviewing work documents or closing their eyes to rest. So all I had to focus on was driving the car. However, there was one particularly difficult person who was an exception. That person was the senior executive, Davis, a man I wished I could avoid dealing with altogether. Approaching 50 years old, Davis always had a sharp, intimidating glare and looked down on me with disdain. He was the classic type who tried to dominate others unnecessarily to appear superior in business settings. I now believe Davis lacked self-confidence, and his behavior was a way to compensate by belittling others. If he had been quiet, I wouldn't have minded as much, but unfortunately, Davis was needlessly talkative. "You always look so gloomy. You're dragging my mood down." Hearing sudden insults like that was an everyday occurrence. I thought to myself that I couldn't exactly change my face just because he called it gloomy, and I never forced a smile in response. This seemed to irritate Davis further, making him see me as defiant. "Don't dawdle. You passed the car ahead earlier, catch up." Or, "Ugh, another traffic jam. Can't you figure out how to choose a faster route, you incompetent fool?" He would continue berating me like this. No matter what he said, I never argued back. I simply replied with a detached, "I'm sorry." But there was one incident I found completely unforgivable. It happened when I was driving Davis and we passed the riverbank area. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of some of my old companions there. As I suppressed the urge to abandon Davis in the car and run down to talk with my old friends, I heard his voice. "Look at these filthy homeless people living here. These trash ruin the view. It'd be so satisfying to just burn them all away." His outrageous words made me unconsciously ease off the gas pedal. If I hadn't, I don't think I could have kept the car moving straight with my hands trembling in anger. The friends I had at the riverbank would never say something like what Davis had just said. If anything, they were too kind-hearted, often giving up their own place in society to others until they had nowhere left to go but the riverbank. To hear someone like Davis speak so disdainfully of them, even suggesting their lives were disposable, filled me with a profound sense of hostility. From that moment, I stopped seeing Davis as a difficult boss. and started viewing him as someone I could not and should not tolerate as a human being. Sometime later, I had another chance to drive Davis. That day, he was unusually cheerful. Without any prompting, he began talking. The meeting next week is going to be huge if we pull it off. It's with a major overseas company. If it works out, we're looking at a deal worth $200 million. Competitors are also in the running, but so far, we're ahead by a step. In the next round, I'm going to seal the deal, and when that happens, it'll be certain I'll be the next CEO. If Jones ever retired and Davis became CEO, I decided I would quit immediately. For that moment, you might want to start buttering me up, he added smugly. All I can do is ensure everyone gets to their destination safely, I replied calmly. I had meant to imply that I had no interest in sucking up to him, but as expected, Davis didn't pick up on the nuance. Safe driving is all well and good, but make sure you don't crawl along and make us late for next week's meeting. If that happens, getting fired won't even begin to cover it. Davis laughed loudly, and I kept driving in silence, not even sparing him a glance. Then came the following week. It was the day of the meeting Davis had claimed would seal the $200 million deal. I parked the company car at the building's entrance, waiting for the CEO, senior executive, and interpreter. Soon, the CEO and Davis got in, but the interpreter was nowhere to be seen. I was told there would be 3 passengers. Are they on their way? As it was already past the scheduled departure time, I asked Jones, who turned to Davis with a stern expression. What's going on? Still no word. I've been calling repeatedly, but they're not answering. This is bad. For this deal, we need an interpreter with top-tier skills, so finding a replacement isn't easy. Tom, we can't wait any longer. Just take us there now, Davis. Arrange for a backup interpreter immediately and have them meet us at the site. Understood. I'll handle it right away. I pulled the car out as instructed. Apparently, due to some mishap, the interpreter's arrival had been delayed. Since this was a negotiation with a major overseas company, a skilled business interpreter was essential. I couldn't help but wonder if everything would be okay as I continued driving. Whatever was happening, all I could do for now was get these 2 to their destination on time. This is bad. All the interpreters qualified for this level of negotiation are already booked, and we can't find anyone available. What do you mean? You can't find anyone? I made all the necessary arrangements. It's their mistake, not mine. What are we supposed to do? Neither the CEO nor I have the kind of English proficiency needed for detailed business negotiations. We're likely to get stuck. Even so, there's no way we can postpone this now. We'll just have to manage somehow. You're absolutely right, but still, there's no fixing the impossible. If this fails, what are we going to tell the shareholders? We couldn't do it because of a language barrier, just won't cut it. Despite the crisis, Davis's voice sounded almost amused to me. Meanwhile, Jones had his head in his hands, clearly stressed. By now, the building we were heading to was coming into view. It's hopeless at this point. We'll have to propose canceling the meeting. Don't talk about canceling so easily. Sir, if I may, I might be able to handle the English interpretation. What? You have experience with that. Stay out of this. Just keep driving. Stay quiet, Tom. Are you confident in your English skills? I wouldn't say confident, but I've never had trouble communicating. This isn't some tourist saying hello or how much. It's not the same thing. It's probably just what you learned in school. Don't get ahead of yourself with that. If Tom says he can do it, then I trust him. Jones interjected. Sir, are you serious? Taking someone who only knows middle school English to interpret will be a total embarrassment. This is my decision. Whatever the outcome, I will take full responsibility. Taking full responsibility, I'll remember that, Davis said with a sly grin, shooting me a pointed look. That's a lot of responsibility. If you mess this up, the boss will lose his job. Do your best, Mr. Driver. I didn't react to Davis's words at all and quietly parked the car. We checked in at the reception desk, took the elevator to the upper floor, and entered the designated meeting room. Inside, the female CEO of the other company was already seated. She stood up and stepped forward as we entered. I stood a step behind Jones and Davis, greeting slightly in sync with Jones. Raising my head immediately, I positioned myself to catch every word exchanged between the CEOs. But then something unexpected happened. You're Tom. I can't believe it. Meeting you here of all places. The female CEO wasn't looking at Jones or Davis. Her eyes were fixed on me. Wait, could it be Lisa? Without thinking, I blurted out her name and completely forgot about the job at hand. Lisa, looking delighted, exclaimed, I knew it, and gave me a light hug. Lisa had been my classmate back when I studied at Harvard. We first started talking because of our shared taste in music, and eventually we became close enough to go on multiple camping trips with our group of friends. From the moment we met, Lisa was far more ambitious than I could ever hope to be. She boldly proclaimed, I'm going to start my own company and turn it into a major corporation. I had always admired her drive and sharp intellect, and I thought that one day I might see her on the news as the CEO of some big company. But Lisa had achieved her ambitions even faster than I had imagined, now stepping into us to finalize a massive business deal. While I had spent years as a homeless man, living in a completely different world, Lisa had pursued her dreams relentlessly without faltering. Amazed by her accomplishments, I told her, I always thought you'd end up in a position like this someday. To which she responded with a radiant smile. Meanwhile, Jones and Davis stared at me in stunned silence as I casually chatted with the opposing CEO. Hey, what do you think you're doing? Talking like that in a business meeting? Oh, my apologies. I got carried away. I never imagined I'd run into someone I know here. Someone you know. What's going on here? Tom was my classmate. Lisa chimed in. Wait, Lisa, you can speak English. Tom, you taught me English. Remember, after that, I kept studying with anime. Lisa's accent was a little off, but her English skills were impressive. She then explained to Jones and Davis in somewhat shaky English that I had been her classmate at Harvard. Harvard, the one they show in TV dramas. You're telling me someone like Tom graduated from there. I can't believe it. That makes sense. I promise not to ask about your past, but I always imagined you had an extraordinary background. Still, I didn't expect you to be from such a prestigious university. At that point, I switched to English and said to Lisa, We need to get back on track, Lisa. I have to act as the interpreter for this deal. Could you please talk to the CEO about it? The deal, right? That's why I'm here, but there's no need to negotiate. Wait, if you don't negotiate, our company will be in serious trouble. I know you can be impulsive, but please do your part here. If you have anything to say to me, Let's talk after the meeting. That's not what I meant, Tom. You see, I was planning to decide in this meeting whether to partner with your company or a rival. But now, there's no other choice but to work with your company. What do you mean? We haven't even started negotiations yet. How could you have already decided to work with us? The rival company broke the rules in a severe way. They attempted some outrageous sabotage against your company to secure this deal for themselves. Our company was sabotaged. Yes, this meeting, you weren't supposed to act as the interpreter, right? That's true. But how do you know that? It'll be faster if I let you listen to this. It's in English, so you all should have no trouble understanding it. With that, Lisa guided us to the table, operated her laptop, and opened a file. A small window appeared on the screen, and slightly distorted audio began to play. Don't worry, I'm in charge of arranging the interpreter. Canceling the arrangement is no big deal. Will that guarantee the deal falls through? It's simple. Neither the CEO nor I speak English at all. If the interpreter doesn't show up at the last minute, they won't be able to communicate. The other party will get frustrated and walk out. When that happens, the $200 million deal will automatically go to your company. Very well. If this works, we'll uphold our end of the agreement. Stop being vague. You promised me the vice president's seat, right? Plus, an additional bonus on the initial payout. If you go back on that, I'll have to reconsider our arrangement. Trust us, but this is conditional on our company securing the deal. If you fail, we won't acknowledge any relationship with you, nor will you receive any compensation. Fine, get that fancy seat ready for me. The audio ended there. Jones and I turned to face Davis simultaneously. Davis was pale and visibly shaking. That voice, one of them is yours, isn't it, Senior Executive Davis? No, that's impossible. I would never. That's clearly your voice, the contents of that recording. Was it you who orchestrated the interpreter's absence today? You planned to sabotage us, hand this deal to our rival company, and secure a vice president position for yourself. This must be some kind of fabrication. Lisa, where did this recording come from? Recently, several of our employees discovered that your rival company had been trying to pressure them into collaborating. So, I had someone monitor suspicious actions by the rival staff. They caught this individual meeting with them and discussing this plan. This recording is from that meeting. Of course, I consulted with our lawyers in advance to ensure everything was done legally. So, the rival company was plotting to undermine us, and one of their schemes involved our senior executive. Unbelievable. Exactly, the moment I heard his voice earlier, I recognized it as the same voice from the recording. That settles it. There's no way we can work with such a deceitful company. Who knows what other problems we'd face if we partnered with them. That's why I already decided to collaborate with your company. But I didn't expect Tom to be here, so it threw off my plans. I've been worried about you since you went completely silent. Well, we can catch up later. Right now, let me do my job as the interpreter. So, it's settled you'll move forward with our company for the deal, right? Of course, but first, you need to get rid of that spy. Lisa pointed at Davis, who remained pale and visibly shaken. Even if he couldn't follow all the details of our conversation, he seemed to grasp from the atmosphere that Lisa was implicating him. I quickly relayed Lisa's intent to Jones. You don't even need to tell me. Davis, a formal decision regarding your case will be made during a future board meeting. At the very least, you'll be dismissed with cause. It's possible you'll face termination for misconduct or even civil litigation details to follow. Effective immediately, you are prohibited from participating in any work-related activities. I braced myself, expecting Davis to make some pitiful attempt to defend himself. However, Davis, with unfocused eyes, muttered something under his breath, then collapsed to the floor and lay motionless. Even though Jones and I repeatedly called out to him, Davis didn't respond. However, since he was still breathing, we calmly called for an ambulance. When the ambulance arrived, Davis was taken away. From my non-expert perspective, it seemed he had fainted from the shock of having his scheme exposed in the worst possible way. I didn't think it was anything serious. The dream of becoming vice president at the rival company had vanished. And now he was about to lose everything, so it must have been a huge blow. But it was all his own doing, and I couldn't muster any sympathy for him. Afterward, Davis was dismissed as Jones had declared, since the damage had been mitigated just in time. He avoided a civil lawsuit, but his termination for cause ensured future job prospects would be exceedingly difficult. It seemed Davis had tried to seek help from the rival company, but as they had made clear it was a performance-based deal, they had no intention of offering him a lifeline. I never heard any further news about Davis after that. The contract with Lisa's company was successfully secured, leading to significant growth for our company and an increase in Jones's reputation as a CEO. As for me, I expressed my desire to remain in my current role as a driver, but Jones wouldn't allow it. If you hadn't been there, our company would have been in serious trouble. I need you to assist me more closely from now on. Jones insisted. He promoted me to the role of driver and personal secretary to the CEO. I accepted the position on the condition that I would focus solely on assisting Jones personally, avoiding other interpersonal responsibilities as much as possible. When Jones learned that I had studied business at Harvard, he began consulting me on various aspects of the company's management. I responded to his inquiries as much as my capabilities allowed. As a result, there were signs of further improvement in the company's operations, and Jones's trust in me grew stronger every day. However, on the inside, I felt that the core of who I am had remained unchanged since the day I was unexpectedly approached on the riverside. Through my time living as a homeless person, I had developed a sense of being able to recognize genuinely sincere people. I started to feel that if I could find others I trusted as much as Jones, I'd like to deepen my relationships with them as well. I have no grand ambitions to make a big mark on the world at this point, but I've begun to think about gradually engaging more with society. In my own way, I hope to live a life where I can help those in need. And if, by chance, I find myself utterly disillusioned with the world again, in that case, I'll have no hesitation about returning to the Riverside community, saying, "This is where I truly belong." I've come to hold that thought without any apprehension.